be thinking, that device is really specific. What could he possibly use that for? Let me paint you a picture of my daily routine. Every day I have back-to-back meetings, and I cannot tell you how often I see this. This happens to me at least once a day, if not more. So when tasked to do a habit-focused build, this was one of the first things that sprang to mind. So with the habit in mind, I got to thinking, what sound upon hearing would I be unable to ignore? What sound would break me out of whatever hole I've fallen into on the internet? What sound would spur me into motion? And I have to give credit to Mark here for the inspiration, but for me, child of the 90s, nothing gets me more keyed up than the next question is how to bring that to life. I wanted to make sure I touched on most of the things we learned in the class, so I started with the modeling. I managed to find some models online for Lakitu. Yeah, that's his name, who knew? And quickly found I couldn't load them into Fusion. That would have been too easy. After a bit of Googling, I installed a plugin in Blender, imported the model, modified it a bit, and exported it as an STL file. And then I was off to the races. Well, race is a bit of an exaggeration. As it was my first time using Fusion 360, it was definitely a bit of a learning process. But in the end, after many uses of sketch, extrude, shell, fillet, which is what I think Mark called edge blend, and a little bit of patterning thrown in, I had my objects to print. While I waited the combined 20-some hours for these to finish, it was time to tackle the electronics. The electronics for the project were actually pretty straightforward. As it seemed like overkill to power this little guy with an entire computer, I chose to split up some of the requirements to be done by a Raspberry Pi I'm using elsewhere in the house, and then have the Lakitu powered by a simple microcontroller. In this case, for the microcontroller, I used an ESP826612E, also known as a Node MCU. I also chose to use a mini MP3 player called a DF player, about $5 on Amazon, to store and play the music. Other than that, I needed 3 LEDs, 2 reds, and 1 RGB LED, and the resistors to power them, a low wattage speaker, and an SD card for the mini MP3 player. Wiring was pretty straightforward with the help of some online diagrams, but my end result was not pretty. Still need to level up my PCB game. Finally, everyone's favorite part, the coding. On the Pi side, I used a Python quick start for the calendar API to set up my calendar queries on an interval, in combination with the request library to send a message to the Lakitu. The result was a pretty concise program that queried every 30 seconds and sent a request to Lakitu if there was a meeting starting in the next few minutes. On the microcontroller side, I borrowed some code from the DF Player website for playing music, and merged it together with some various tutorials I found on the web for hosting a server with the Node MCU. The result was a looping piece of code that waits for a meeting to start, flashes warning lights every 30 seconds for 2 minutes prior to the meeting, then on meeting start, plays one of the most recognizable sounds in gaming history. So now that I have that problem out of the way, I just have to figure out how to get out of meetings on time. I guess that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for watching my video.